King of Fighters, a necessity for gracious living.
During the 90s, those living in the Western world can recall the epic battle for fighting game brand supremacy that would transpire between Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter fever would sweep our culture so much that we would even get live action movies. Still, in other parts of the globe, another fighting game series was managing to successfully position itself as the King of Fighters. That's right, throughout Asia, Central and South America, this SNK series of games, developed primarily for the Neo Geo, gave Street Fighter a run for its money. Thanks to the impact of these innovative fighters, the likes of Terry Bogard and Mai Shiranui in certain regions were becoming just as recognisable as Ryu and Chun-Li. So, like with any gaming success story, particularly in developing markets, it was only a matter of time until more shady companies wanted to cash in on SNK's relevance. So, holding such thoughts in mind,
I am Lady Decade, and this is the illegal King of Fighters 96 and other SNK bootlegs for the NES.
Since so many of you subscribed after my Chun-Li cosplay, I used some of the video revenue to buy a Mai Shiranui costume. Thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed, and if you are yet to do so, subscribe now and help me reach 100,000 subscribers. And I'll cosplay as Morrigan next. Thanks again. Now let's get on with the video. While Street Fighter and King of Fighters are often considered two competing brands, I've always found it incredibly interesting that the pair of franchises are related beyond their gameplay similarities. King of Fighters, technically an SNK crossover featuring a range of different characters from various other franchises, includes the Bogard brothers and Geese Howard amongst their well-known combatants. All of these characters would debut in Fatal Fury, a 1991 fighting game designed by Takashi Nishiyama, who originally created the first Street Fighter game in 1987, thus making SNK Fighters and Street Fighters brothers born from the same father.
The world of Japanese video game development is far more inbred than one might expect.
As mentioned on this channel a lot here, the success of Street Fighter 2 would see the game bootlegged a lot. Amongst these would include the 8-bit Famicom version of the game developed by Hummer Team. The same fighting game engine that was developed for this game was reused repeatedly, which would include many reiterations of bootleg Street Fighter 2. With SNK fighting games being highly popular, it was not long until they were bootlegs for 8-bit Nintendo clone hardware, with the first of these arriving in 1993. Konami would be the first to do this, so let's take a peek at the illegal Fatal Fury 2.
To be fair though, this one looks pretty solid.
The game's introductory sequence mirrors the one found in the arcade game of the same name, and the graphics are pretty solid looking for an NES title. This game, published by the legendary Konami, across many areas imitates the SNK classic on the rudimentary hardware well. This could not be more true than with each stage backdrop, which appear bright, vibrant and vivid, and features a fair amount of animation for an NES game. But when it comes to the gameplay itself, replication isn't quite as accurate. Due to likely using the same engine used for a Street Fighter 2 bootleg, the Fatal Fury 2 bootleg plays more like a Street Fighter title than an SNK one, with no sign of a power bar present, unlike the source material. Despite what appears to be a large selection of fighters on the character select screen, like with many bootlegs, a large chunk of these are no more than palette swaps, meaning the options are far more limited to what appears on the surface.
What's a joke? What is this? A Mortal Kombat game?
Still, we do have fan favourites here, such as both Bogard brothers, the boobalicious Mai Shiranui, Kim Capwan, Cheng Sinzan and even Lawrence Blood. For an 8-bit bootleg, it's a reasonably competent one. But now let's move on to what you may likely be here for, coverage of a full-on bootleg King of Fighters game. Let's move on to the 8-bit King of Fighters 96. Have a look at this. Oh yes, this one has everything anyone could want from an 8-bit King of Fighters bootleg. An intro scene that crudely mirrors the arcade game with some excellent use of standard English and surprisingly detailed graphics. Above the expectations one might have for a game of this ilk. We have found a winner, ladies and gentlemen, so let's talk more about this one. For those who have been watching this channel for a while, last year you may have watched my upload when I covered the illegal Street Fighter Alpha 2 for the NES. While sold as Alpha 2, this Hummer Team game instead gave its best effort to imitate the first Alpha game, delivering exciting results on the Famicom hardware. Observations noted on bootleggames.fandom indicates that this King of Fighters 96 game, released in 1998, was likely based on the Street Fighter Alpha game. This assumption can be made due to the two titles featuring the same garbled sprites at the top of the screen during fights, and many of the game's sound effects and music being reused. However, let's be honest, assets being reused for bootleg titles is far from an uncommon affair. While the roster selection suggests this one to have a large selection of characters, in typical bootleg fashion, this is deceiving once again, so palette swaps excluded, there are 7 fighters to choose from. This one somewhat builds on what can be found in the Street Fighter Alpha bootleg by including a range of difficulty settings, but most importantly, a team mode mechanic, which is a lovely touch. A team mode is an excellent addition since team mode was one of the standout features in the King of Fighters series that helped it stand out from other fighting games on release. What makes this quality bootleg all the more interesting is that it seems there was an intention during development to include 20 fighters in the game. Obviously, 13 of these were cut from the project, possibly due to time constraints. However, others speculate it was to ensure this title fit on a Famicom cartridge. Bootleggames.fandom notes that if 20 characters had been successfully implemented into this one, it would have made the game bigger than any official NES release. Aside from King of Fighters 96, a bootleg would also be published as King of Fighters 97, so let's show off some gameplay. Now, what makes this one interesting is that not only is this a different game published and developed by a different team of bootleggers known as REXoft, but what is more strange about this is that although it carries the name King of Fighters 97, the reality is that it's a bootleg of the older King of Fighters 95. This one has a more extensive selection of fighters though, with gamers gaining access to 9 different athletes this time round. Even if the roster screen as usual appears absolutely massive, players can pick teams of 3 and go to war against opponents in this bootleggy lunacy. The game does feature some annoying graphical effects, such as this bizarre shaky effect that is implemented every time one player gets a hit on another. It's a pretty disorientating graphical effect, making it look like an earthquake occurs every time you do something.
It's basically the equivalent of if this was happening throughout the video.
In cheeky bootleg fashion, REXoft would re-release this game with a brand new title screen, selling the title as King of Fighters 98 before doing exactly the same thing the following year, shifting the game as King of Fighters 99. I mean, the hustle has to be respected. No matter what title this game carries, I think the best of these bootlegs is the King of Fighters 96 we looked at earlier, produced by the legendary Taiwanese Hummer team. If you have watched much of my content, you will know that they have a track record for producing some of the most impressive bootlegs. In my opinion, their King of Fighters game is another excellent addition to their legacy. It's a shame really, as if these games were not so illegal, then a Hummer Team collection would have been absolutely amazing for the Nintendo Switch. There is a market for plumbers don't wear ties on the console, for crying out loud, so people would definitely pay out for these. Anyway, if you enjoyed this one, don't forget to subscribe to help me reach 100k and do that Morrigan themed episode. Also, why not check out my video on the illegal Street Fighter EX for Super Nintendo right now.